Yes.
A lot of these horror movies, my younger brother, he loves horror movies, and a lot of them are just too visual. It's not really enough meat on it. There's not enough storyline behind it. For me, the content, if it is horror, it has to have some story, some material behind it, or else for
Mm.
me, it's just really good cinematography. And that's what I think a lot of people are drawn to: really good cinematography and really good special effects. And I think that really draws people. Well, but if you're blind, that's really boring. Nothing personal. But
I know. Yes.
so it's like, I totally understand why, I totally get why horror movies in the States really kind of, as you put it, lost their mojo, I think you said. And now
Yes.
they've really got it back with some, much, much better examples. But what is the example that you were going to give in Sixth Sense? Maybe you can kind of illustrate it
Well,
a little.
I don't think I'm spoiling the movie because it's an older movie. But
Oh,
in the movie, Bruce Willis is a child psychologist who's sent to help a child who has disturbing visions.
oh boy.
And the phrase, which is kind of in the sort of public lexicon of great phrases, "I see dead people."
Mm-hmm.
So they hint it all the way through. And right at the end, they reveal that all this time, the psychologist himself is dead, but he just doesn't realize it. And he's sort of moving through the living world while he's dead. And the child realizes from the get-go, hey, you're dead. You just don't get it. And the child is trying to tell him. So you have this. And it's done in such a way where you keep thinking from the director's way of doing it that the child is the one who's like deranged. But then you realize at the end of it, this narrator, I think the phrase is unreliable narrator. So from the beginning, Bruce Willis, who shows up as a psychologist, you realize, oh, hang on, all along we thought he was alive. He's actually dead. And they don't give that away. They don't betray it. They make all the music, all the sound effects, they're all very real world sound effects. There's nothing spooky about Bruce Willis's sound effects. The ones where the child sort of encounters ghosts, which talk to the child because he can talk and see ghosts, they have some sort of more supernatural, the sort of the jump cuts, the spooky sudden, the brass or orchestra stabs, which sort of goes, scare you a little bit. That sort of stuff is associated.
Jump scare. In American English, the jump scare.
Jump scare, okay.
The jump scare, yeah.
So the ones, they're all focused on the child. And it's not until literally the last few minutes of the movie it's flipped around. And then it's revealed all along, you've been misled. The adult is dead. The child is completely normal. He just happens to see dead people.
Brilliant.
I think that's one of the very successful films.
Brilliant script. Yeah, that would be absolute brilliance. Yeah, that's a really good. Yeah, I can see where that would be very, very successful. But of course, I have to make you sweat a little bit here. I have to make you. I have to try to just see what happens. So tell us, out in the audience, someone would love to know, since you're so interested in horror content, and since so much of your content is sent in to you, maybe by request from people around the world, tell me about a recent supernatural experience or an unexplained experience that you might have had in your life. Have you had any?
I wouldn't say so, no. I live in Asia, and there is a lot of folklore around here, which if you're not familiar with it, you don't realize it, and you just don't think, oh, but that's, and the thing is, you sort of say, well, isn't that explainable through science? Isn't that explainable through something more straightforward? But then you see people who are very much, they have the conviction of their beliefs of something supernatural. And it's very, very strong. And you cannot dissuade people that they haven't seen a ghost, that they haven't been visited by a deceased relative, their mother, or whatever it is. And you realize that there's almost a certain amount of, if you believe it that strongly, who are you as perhaps someone who wants to say, show me physical scientific proof? That, again, it's like, is what this person says, it's what that person says. Who's actually telling the truth?
Right.
I'm sorry if that doesn't achieve the on the spot sweating that you were hoping for.
That is fine. That is fine. That is fine. No worries, no worries. But what you said was very informative. That basically people, and by the way, I've done a lot of traveling all over the world. Lived in England for 3 months studying in university.
Wow.
Oh, I love England. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful place. Don't let anybody tell you that England isn't perfect. It's perfect. And then I've been to France 3 times because my second language is French. Austria, Amsterdam, Poland. All over Europe, Swaziland in Africa. I've been all over the world. But I do find that people obviously have different beliefs and different perceptions of society in different regions of the world. Yeah. For example, a really clear-cut example was when I was in Swaziland. One day it was an organized tour, and we went to a traditional healer, a traditional medicine man,
Okay.
and there was some basically it was just the Swazi equivalent of a trained pharmacist, but the difference is that they have like kind of a room with like all their potions and all their things like laid out all over the floor or on shelves, and they basically ask you questions about your spiritual health to understand what might be wrong with you physically. It's pretty cool and a little spooky and a little unsettling, but I totally get it. And it works that they've said, that they work with the doctors in the country and that their work as a medicine man actually does help. It does help people to live a healthy life. So there's like different interesting things that you learn along the way like that. But no, I've never been to Asia. I have heard that people in some Asian countries certainly believe in ghosts. In fact, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Thailand, there's some sort of a festival of ghosts or something like that.
Yes.
There's
Yep.
some,
Mhm.
yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that if you want, and if you know more about that. Yeah.
Well, actually, just recently is the Hungry Ghost Month, which is, I think it's more of a Chinese thing. And this is when the gates of hell are opened for 1 month and everyone's allowed to come out. And what you end up doing is that people will leave offerings for the ghosts. And as long as you don't offend them, they will come, take the offering. And a month later, the gates of hell close and the ghosts are all gone again. I have a 5-year-old, and so trying to explain that to her was actually quite tricky because you want to say, well, this is Chinese culture. This is what they believe. This is why you are seeing sort of, and people would leave these offerings literally on the pavement, outside a shop, outside a house. It would be sometimes just food which isn't immediately perishable. Obviously, you leave something outside, a cat's going to come along and grab it. But if you leave something like peanuts, a cat's not going to take it, a dog's not going to take it. You might leave oranges and stuff like that. And sometimes you would burn a joss stick, which is these really tiny, very, very thin little things. And they have kind of a slow burn effect. They will literally go for like an hour before they go out. So trying to explain this to a 5-year-old was interesting because there I am trying to explain to her this is a belief of the Chinese people. She is half Chinese. My wife is Chinese. She's Singaporean. So in explaining that to her, it sort of opened up new problems because as a 5-year-old, she has a very active imagination. And of course, then she thought, is there a ghost next to me right now? And that was kind of one of these sort of a parenting moment where my wife and I thought, oh, crap, we've just opened up a real Pandora's box. And then we had to say, well, have you been behaving? Have you, don't kick over any offerings you see on the pavement. Step over them, step around them. If you don't do anything mean to them, they won't do anything mean to you. So you're fine. And we thought, okay, great. We dodged a bullet there, but she came back to it. Okay, but is there a ghost standing next to me right now? And we luckily we live on the second floor. We came up, we sort of fibbed on the spot. Well, ghosts can't go upstairs. Which is, according to the culture, that is not true at all.
Yeah. See, there's this video I have. I can see
Uh-huh.
it shows a ghost walking up a flight of steps. Right, right. But that's really. I mean, it's really interesting to think about. Okay, we produce this horror content obviously for adults, which is ironic. Ironic in that most people who see ghosts and these entities or apparitions, most of them are children.
Yes.
And the belief is pretty straightforward that a child is more likely to believe that they saw a ghost. So
Mm.
it goes both. That's the reasoning. So it goes both ways. Well, is it that the ghost is simply drawn to the child's spirit because the ghost knows that the child will probably see it better? Or are children more likely to say that they saw a ghost because the child doesn't have a filter? Probably two-way street. Probably both is my
Yep.
is my
Yep.
perce- is my perception. Um, oh, I'll tell you. I don't want to say it on the recorder, but I'll tell you something. No, because it's really sad, and I don't want to distract people from listening. But I'll tell you something that really kind of cool and kind of sad, and definitely sad, that happened to me a couple months ago. It's okay though, but I have to say it off the air. I don't want to make a big scene. But yeah, it's really fascinating how different cultures perceive horror and perceive that type of thing. So okay, now back to the studio, back to your
Okay.
podcast. So when you're looking at topics, obviously, like all the horror content, people say, well, if you've had a scary story, send it in to blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah at gmail.com, and we'll take a
Mhm.
look at it. So, number one, how do you manage that? I'm sure that you get tens of thousands of submissions. And really, how do you, what is the threshold for, deciding what really makes the cut and what gets into Hollywood, I guess? What do you think?
Well, we have a pretty straightforward. Well, let me give you a longer backstory on the podcast. The podcast is an in-house production of my studio. We have done 5 different in-house podcasts so far. They've all been a different format. We had one which was a group panel discussion as a comedy-based one. We had one which was a straightforward interview. We had one where we recorded spoken word poets, which is a sort of a very niche thing in and of itself. And then we had one which is more narrative style, where there's a lot of different interviews, which is mixed together with a common narrator. So this is a new one which we've done. And it was originally born out of the idea of the 2-sentence horrors. And I think they were a viral thing somewhere around 2015, which was basically exactly what it sounds like. It's 2 sentences. So as for a writer, they like that. It's like, okay, this is the parameters. I've got 2 sentences. I can start with something normal and then twist it in the second sentence, or I can start with something twisted in the first one and twist it even further in the second one. So, for example, you can have something saying, I'm the last person alive in the world. There was a knock at the door, right? So right there, yes, it's 2-sentence horror. Another one which I thought was quite cute was, I found a body in the trunk of my car, which is odd because I put 2 there this morning. So there you go, right? So very, very, very simple format. And you can find them all over the internet, and there's lots of them. And you realize that it's been so long that people have taken other people's 2-sentence horrors, they've changed the wording a little bit, they repost it as their own. So it gets to the point where you would honestly find it impossible to figure out who wrote the thing first. So in some ways, it's in the public domain. And I thought, it'll be fun. This is something I thought in July. Wouldn't it be fun if we had a podcast where we just do these 2-sentence horrors and we put a little bit of music underneath it, but it's only 2 sentences, and we'd have one every day from September the 1st up to Halloween. And we just treat it like a marketing exercise for the studio. Like, look, we did this fun thing. It was kind of cute. It was kind of nifty. We just did 61 episodes, and that's it. But then we ran into a problem. 2 sentences, it's really hard to string out 2 sentences for anything longer than maybe 30 seconds. And if you include the usual stuff which you have to include on a podcast, which is tell people which podcast they're listening to, and then you have your content, and then you have the bit at the end, which is, get in touch if you want to. This is our website. Say hello. Support us via Patreon. All of that stuff, that all takes time. So if you just have 2 sentences, that's too little. And we struggled with that. And then what happened was I was in touch with some local writers, fiction writers, and they initially were like, yeah, let's do 2 sentences. That's awesome. But when we came back, they said, you know what? We really need more sentences. We can't get enough of a twist. There's just not enough time to cover it. And then while we were brainstorming, I remember the TV show, I mean, this would have been in the early 90s, called The X-Files, which I think was on Fox. David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson. And their show structure had what they call a cold opening. It come out of the ad break, and straight away you just be dropped into the middle of something that was ongoing, and it would end. It would be typically 2 to 3 minutes, and at the end of it, there would be something really scary. And then it would go to the main title music, the sort of the classic, the Mark Snow music with the echoey, and then you'd have the rest of the episode where